Rabbi Avram El Yaxel, he was a Chabad Rav from 1925 in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
And he learned in Lubavitch. He was from the Hasidim that learned by the Rebbe Rashab, still in the Lubavitch. And he came over, and although, some of the congregants were children or grandchildren of Lubavitch Hasidim, and that's why it was called Anshe Lubavitch Tzemach Tzedek, like many shuls in Chicago, in New York and Philly. I mean, you had maybe you could say hundreds of them from the turn of the century till the 1950s. Mamish. They had 5 in New York and 5 in Baltimore, and you had them all over. Anyway, so he was the Rav of the newly built. They built a new building, actually, where John Hopkins is today, and it's being gentrified. The area was a very, very rough area for years. So, but it used to be, that was the main place where the Frum Yidden were. The Yekis. Baltimore was a very strong Yekish community. And Russians of all sorts, both Litvaks and Hasidim. And the Hasidim were pretty much Chabad Hasidim, but these were all already children and grandchildren. So the ones who came from the Lubavitch Chabad, line, they wanted a Lubavitcher Rav, and I don't know how they heard about this Rabbi Axelrod, whose father was at the time a shamish in a shul in Marietta, Ohio. He came over, I think, in 1914 as a rev, what they called a reverend in those days, a moel, a sheichet, a malamed,
Yeah.
Anyway, so somehow they found out about this Axelrod, that he came finally, to America, and they grabbed him, as a Rav, and he was a Rav. He was not just a Rav, he was a big Yiddish Shemayim and a Talmud Chacham and a very nice person. There are many stories that I heard about him, which to me, it's very different than the average chassid. Even the average Lubavitch, he spoke Yiddish and didn't speak English, so the congregants complained when the Frierdiker Rebbe came to Baltimore in 1930. They complained against the rabbi. He does not speaking to our kids. The kids were American. And the primary thing in those days was to keep the kids frum. And we know that many kids were not frum. It was the melting pot. So they felt if they had a Rav who could instill in the kids and then the teenagers, and here he can't speak the language, but they hired him because they're comfortable with such a person. That's where they come from. So it was a dichotomy. So the bottom line is that they complained to the previous Rebbe. I heard this, what I'm telling you, from the president of Agudas Chabad, son. His name was Patashnik, David Patashnik, I think, or I forget his first name. And no, not David, was the father. So his father, Reb David, was the one who hosted the previous Rebbe. He was Mr. Lubavitch. In addition to the rabbi, he was the head of Agudas Chabad for Baltimore. So I interviewed the son, this about 20 years ago, and he told me that his father told him the story that I'm telling you. And they went to complain to the previous Rebbe. And the Rebbe said, you don't know what kind of diamond you have as your rabbi. And basically, be quiet. His Yiddish will have an impact on those kids more than another English-speaking rabbi's impact. Again, paraphrasing, but that was the idea. And he made an impact. So there's an introduction to the story. The story is, as the years went on, I don't have to tell you all, we all know in shuls, some people like to talk and they gab and they talk and they talk and they talk. And if they don't talk during davening, they talk before davening, and before davening, you just get up, you're tired still, you come in, you want some quiet and peace, and you want to get the davening started. So he wrote a letter, Rabbi Axelrod, to his friend Rabbi Posner, who at the time, I forget where he was. Maybe he was, I'm not sure where he was. Anyway, he wrote a letter to him.
Nashville? Nashville?
No, this is Nashville's father, Rabbi Shalom Posner.
Oh.
Later he came to Pittsburgh. He was in Pittsburgh from the mid-40s, from 43, 44, the rest of his life. Anyway, I think at the time he was in Eretz Yisrael also, so maybe he wrote to him in Eretz Yisrael. Anyway, they knew each other from Lubavitch. So he wrote to him, so Rabbi Axelrod wanted to kind of put an end to the talking before davening. So he wrote to Posner, asking Posner what his opinion is. I think it was Posner. Anyway, he wrote to a chassid. And he wrote him back a letter. In the letter, he told him a story with a chassid of the Rebbe Marash, Reb Shmuel. That during the time of Rebbe Marash, there was a similar situation in a Lubavitcher Stiebel, somewhere in Russia. The Pasha Eden, they came to shul and they were talking, and the spirit. Oh, and then he said, that they were learning Chassidus before davening, but they were drinking tea. Now, in real old Chabad, you didn't drink tea when you learned Chassidus. It's not like us taking some water or a drink. This was a different. It was very, very tense. It was a different time. So the Rav of that shul in the shtetl wrote to the Rebbe Marash that he wants to stop serving tea or having them have tea while they're learning Chassidus. And the Rebbe Marash answered, do not do it, because if you do it, they won't come. Not only not to Chassidus daven, this is once a week. These Yidden work so hard during the week. They schlep and everything else, and they get to a shul on Shabbos to daven together, and they want some tea during the Chassidus. It's fine. Now you're talking about in the 1870s, a story from the 1870s, okay? 100 more years. So he wrote this story to Rabbi Axelrod. Oh, I forgot another point. Rabbi Axelrod said like this, that he implemented no talking like before davening, and what he saw is less and less people were coming to davening. So that's when he wrote to his friend, what should he do? Should he, and his friend wrote him back, you should stop your decree and let them come and talk before davening. This way they'll come to shul. So he listened, and and people started to come again. So I take away from this story, the importance of camaraderie in shul. Now, of course, I'm not suggesting middle of davening, but it's acceptable if they speak a little bit before davening, especially after davening. That's an ikar. It's an ikar. I think there might even be some letters of the Rebbe to Rabbanim about the importance of serving a kiddush. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate, But so you mentioned the kiddush of Farbrengen after davening. For some people, it is the highlight of the week, and that's when people bond, and that's where people help each other with Gemilas Cheseds. It's a very, very important thing. So keep it up, Moshe. I just wanted to say that.
Rebbe, before you start, I wanted to tell you something interesting. So there was a guy I used to daven with at the Young Israel Bedford Bay in Brooklyn. And there's a guy, he wasn't a frum guy, but he would come always for the kiddush. That was his thing. He lived with a dog. He had a little dog. And he used to work for, I think it was Meal Mart. He worked for Meal Mart. And he would donate stuff for the kiddush and for the shalosh shudas in the shul, like the egg salad, the tuna fish, all that. And I remember walking home from shul once with him, and he said to me, he goes, the only connection I have to Yiddishkeit is this kiddush. Is like just being part of this camaraderie.
That's it. That's exactly what we're saying. And sometimes that person leaves over the $2 million check in his inheritance for the shul. But that's not, that's just the brownie point, the extra credit, he doesn't. I mean, Rabbi, I don't know if Rabbi Naftali is still in Los Angeles, had such a story where a man came in to say a Kaddish. He said a Kaddish. He never saw him again or something, and he left him over a tremendous amount, which was the money to build his new shul, which was like a multi-million-dollar building. He got it from that person's in Yerusha. So I'm just saying that's But the etzem zach that a Yid think itself that a Jew has a possibility to express, like you just said the story, that's very important. That's what it's about. Okay. Let's learn some chassidus. I'm not. Moshe and I were talking about. I asked him whether he and others understood what I was saying. The last year, which I thought was actually a very good year. He said it was very deep stuff. Yeah, it was deep stuff, but I gave some concrete mishalim. It's online. You can listen to it again, and I'd rather go further than revisit it. So, when you're in the mood to learn some deep chassidus, turn on that YouTube of me, and you'll hear it. If you like it, use it. But let's continue now. We're on page 202, chapter Yud Aleph.
I think that Rabbi Dolphin, do you mind if we do the kitzer before we go to Yud Aleph?
We'll do the kitzer, yeah.
Yeah.
Kitzer, Yevayer, the Amuna B'Male Kol Almin. We explained in the previous chapter that having faith in Hashem's energy, which we call B'Male Kol Almin, the pervading energy, the one that deals with nature, etc., the V'Soiviv Kol Almin, and then there's the energy of Hashem known as Soiviv. It encompasses, it's the supernatural. Heim Bei Zefane Bittul. They are two different types of subservience to Hashem. Habitl, and here one is called the subservience, the das tachtoin, of the lower opinion, the lower knowledge, which is bitl hayesh le'ayin, the acceptance that there is an existence, yesh, and that this yesh, this existence, this entity is subservient, bitl leha'ayin, to the level of God known as nothing, because it's so far and distant from us we don't understand what it is. So this is the perspective that we call das tachtoin. And the bittul is be'aora likis ha'machayos olamos. So this level of godly energy is the reflection and emanation of God that creates all the worlds. That's one, Moshe. Number two, v'habittul, then there's a second type of bittul, of subservience, the das elyon, of the upper, the higher level of knowledge. In other words, from God's perspective. Who? Bittul b'metzius. This is the subservience not only of form, but also of idea. And again, briefly, before you can deal with form, the form needs to exist somehow in idea, in concept. If the idea doesn't exist in concept, then the form is of air. It's nothing. So before Hashem created the actual physical world, the yesh, right? The yesh, something. Avi, something that's tangible, the idea of a world existed in God, in the Godhead. Hashem in himself said to himself, I want to have a world. Was there a world yet? No. Okay? So this is what we call the bittul b'metzius. Now, in other words, imagine an idea. Here, let's try to say this. An idea. The idea, as the idea is in your head, what place, what room, what significance, that's the better word. What significance is there to the idea as the idea exists in your head? Very little, because it's still only in your head. It has nothing to do with reality. But the flip side is, if it doesn't begin in your head, it never comes to reality. Right? So, in a sense, where is the idea most prominent? In the head, not in reality. Reality is already an afterthought. Reality is the expression of what you had in your head. Here's another example, and Moshe, maybe you could relate to it in your way, your art. I'll talk about it from as a writer. the way I write is, and I would assume most writers, but the way I write is, I first try to formulate the idea in my head. And once I have the idea in my head, what I want to say, what I understand, then I put it in writing. Right? Speaking is this way too. Organized speaking requires knowing the thought you want to communicate. Granted, during the time of speech, it says in Chassidus, and it's true, there is a flow from the source of speech, which comes at times during speaking, which you didn't prepare. You didn't prepare. And all of a sudden, words come to you and ideas come to you that were not in the script. So Chassidus explains that's because the power of speech touches something deep in the soul, which transcends preparation. Right? But I'm not talking here about speech, I'm talking about the idea. So that's what he says here. Think about the bittul, the das elyon. 1 second. The idea of God creating a world as the world stands in idea in God is so much less of an entity from our perspective as reality is an entity. Yes, Moshe.
Yeah, I was just going to say that many times I find myself when I'm speaking with people, sometimes I have to get up and I speak in public.
Yeah.
And so usually when that's the case, I prepare in advance to say what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
But I find many times I'm having, off the cuff, candid conversations with people, and I find sometimes that's when some of the most introspective and thoughtful.
Okay, but it's but that's two separate things. That's two separate things. That's true. But giving a formal talk when you're announcing the times of shul or this or that or whatever, that's a whole different type of a talk. You're not looking to be intimate and informal at that time. You're looking to be formal. Is that correct?
Yes, you could say that. In that type of a talk, yeah. I mean, I guess I'm speaking about, let's say, in terms of my work. I'm giving a presentation about a particular piece, ideas, or a software.
Yeah.
But okay, yeah, I could see maybe what you're saying are two different things.
No. So I said to myself, while a person speaks, many times something unprepared comes that's very profound and very special that's coming from a deeper place. So that happens also when in everyone's presentation. But I'm saying the comparison you made to, intimate conversation, and I'm saying that, very impactful conversation one-on-one, that's a whole different scenario. Okay, let's continue the kitzur. We know. What are you supposed to, where do we experience these two levels of subservience? Avi, in the two times, Hashem Echad, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hashem Echad, Yonason is Yechudi Ilah, or Das Elyon. With not only is the reality not a reality, the idea is not a reality, because it's subservient to Hashem. Baruch Shem is the lower level of Yichud, where the idea is paramount. It's an idea. It's not bottle. Only the reality of it, its existence, the yesh is bottle to the ayin. Emunah makif. We also learned in the chapter that emunah can be emunah is but inherently makif, superficial, and that's why gamva apum machtarta, the thief at the threshold of the tunnel where he's about to steal, Rachmana Karya, he calls to God, help me steal. And we said, how can you have both together? The answer is because the emunah is makif. Yudalef. The Rebbe now brings it home. Okay, so now we're going down the mountain. We were on a mountain, and now we're going down. Everyone can and should find this in himself. In Begasus, whether these issues are in a very coarse way by the individual, or in a very refined way. We ask of help of Hashem. It could be that what we're asking of God is an extra, an indulgence. You don't really need this. You know, you're asking Hashem, God, give me 6 cars, 2 yachts, and 5 homes. Okay? V'hu rak l'mala is top of 203. The only reason for this is l'mala's taivas nafshe, because you have a taiva, you're a glutton. Shein zeh ritzoyni yisbarach, and this is not God's will, of course. Bedugmas gamva pum machtarta. It's exactly like the thief standing on the threshold of the tunnel, of the entrance to the door. Right? He needs money, and he doesn't recognize that it's a contradiction to trust in God and belief in God. Well, you do the same thing. You're not stealing, but you're indulging. We're indulging. How is it that we can make such a gross mistake? Says the Rebbe, it's because because we're misled. We mislead ourselves. We mistakenly think, and we consider ourselves, we are God's gift to humanity. You know who I am? Oh, you know, my mother was, my father was, my rabbi was. Wow. He's precious in his own eyes. And it appears to him, it appears to him, I deserve to be wealthy. If I have this money, I'll give out so much tzedakah, God. You owe it to me. And he says, you, God, give me all this wealth, I'll be able to serve you carte blanche. Boy, will I splurge. Kiddush in the park? You'll have a feast in the park. His primary kavanah, you know why he really wants it? He likes gashmias. L'malas taivas nafshe. He has a taiva to fresh, to eat, to show off, to boast, to brag, to be in the papers, to be the big macher. That's really why he wants it. It's baloney haloney that he wants to give tzedakah. She'ein zeh ritzoyna yizbarich klal, says the Rebbe, and this is not Hashem's will. Hashem is not looking for you to be a schwitzer and a macher and a big shot. And so this is like Yonason is laughing. This is the Rebbe laying it on, like heavy. This is a gasus, a big shot, right? Now he goes to someone who's more refined. Let's look at the character here he describes. The yesh zebedakos. The same idea we find in a refined way. Ukamay basic maso matan. Let's talk about business. The basic maso matan who klila parnosa. Right? You have to work. You have to do business. But tzarach liyas kli tahara. We know that business needs to be a pure keli. V'haini. Beli shum nidnut isu, without an iota forbidden the sheker of fallacy and lies, uknev and thievery kai gavna. V'yeh masan ben muna. Famous, the Gemara. Your business should be faithful. Ad inyan v'dei b'remes b'vavit. To the point, not only your practicality should be truthful, but in your heart, it should be emes. Kamay merazal, like the sayings, the Chazal say. Maybe later I'll elaborate a little bit what that means, truthful in the heart. When someone takes a loan, I just give an example. Are they 100% truthful that they're taking the loan and they're really planning on paying it back and they're not going to make shenanigans and shtick? Okay? Unfortunately, a lot of people take loans with the kavanah. I'm going to dray a cup. I'm not going to pay back. I'm going to, make shtick. You have no business taking a loan. Well, tell the person you're taking a loan from, I'm going to make you crazy when it's time to pay you back. I'm going to try to Peter and Paul and all that. And then see if the person wants to give it to you. If the person wants to give it to you, he wants to put up with your narishkeit, no problem. And I'm talking about even in moistus, in institutions. Okay? I've seen this in Jewish institutions, unfortunately. You know, in the name of the institution, you can go and take a loan and really not be truthful in your heart of hearts. Because the person who's giving you the loan, most times, I'm giving you a loan for this time, I expect it back on this time. And at least, if you can't pay it back at that time, some people will say, come and let's discuss it. You know, the honesty, but not like, you know, many times we play around. That's not Dover Emes Bilvovai. That's what I'm focusing on the words. For Dover Emes Bilvovai. Are you talking truth in your heart when you take the loan, when you make the deal? Or are you thinking, you know what I'm saying? Oh, that man's a very wealthy man anyway. That's why he's giving me a loan. He can give me the loan, the other person can give me the loan. So big deal, fellow. Well, you know, excuse the expression, screw him and mess him up and let him, you know, fly a kite. Tell him that when you take the loan, tell him, are you going to be upset if I act this way? And if he says, I might be upset, but it's all right. In other words, basically, he's departing with the money, like I've said in the past. In a way, saying, if I never get paid, it's tzedakah. Okay, if that's what, if he's on that level, kol hakavod, you know. But many people aren't. So, v'dever emes bilvovai, be honest inside your heart. The Rebbe says the overall idea of parnasa has to be for the sake of heaven. There should be a godly thought associated with the parnasa. The truth is, Hashem gave a person permission to work and do business. 6 days a week you shall work. God will bless all your doings. The kavanah is not the asiyah. The kavanah is the result of the asiyah, of the action. This is not the ultimate purpose why man was created, is to work. Like my father's mashpia told him when he was 15 and a half years old, and my grandfather wanted him to stop working like they did in Romania and go work and help the family. And the mashpia said to my father, "Abehema arbit." An animal works. We're not in Romania, we're in Eretz Yisrael. We build the country through learning at 15, 16, 17 years old. Abehema arbit. That's what the mashpia told my father. My father always repeated it. Let's continue. Now, of course, you know, today we have a situation where some boys, girls, you know, are not shaykh at that, so that needs to be looked at carefully. But I'm just saying the idea is that structure and you know, okay. Why was man created primarily on the I've made the earth, but also I created man upon it. The word, the letters, Barosi, equals 613. B'shvil Taryag mitzvahs. I created a world for the 613. In Cain. Gam basiyas eisek hazeh. Hakavonu sheyeh b'zeh inyan leki. What is the purpose of the work? There should be a godly experience through it. V'hainu haberurim shenasa yidei eisek. The refinement of the sparks that are done through the business. In Cain, if this is the intent, when it comes time to ask Hashem to help us with parnasa, we must know if the job I'm doing is proper, that it's pure, it's not genev, it's not shtick. And we have to put a lot of effort into the fact that the asik that we do should be a pure vessel. And sometimes you have to go away from something. וצריכים להשתדל שיהיה בלי, והיינו שיהיה כפי הכוונה. It should be according to the kavanah of Hashem, the purpose of God's purpose. Amna. So what's the issue? Since the category of emunah, faith, is superficial, Moshe, the item of faith is a superficial item. It doesn't permeate. I believe. You don't understand it. You don't feel it. You believe. So faith is on its own a superficial item. So let's look what he says. Since faith is makiv, so he doesn't pay so much attention. He says, I have faith. I believe. In other words, when you have to explain something logically, you pay much more attention to it. When you have to feel something emotionally, you pay much attention to it. When it comes to faith, you don't pay so much attention. Faith, I have faith. The Rebbe goes back to what he said earlier in the Maamar. And this is the connection to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Purim and all that. That is why emunah needs to be fed. Emunah, we have belief. Everyone says, I believe. What do you believe? You believe and you go to sleep, or you do nothing. You believe. That's why animamin needs parnasa. You have to sustain it. You have to feed it. You have to energize it. Look what he says. You have to make the faith that on its own, Jonas is superficial, it should shine inside Bipnimius. And this was the service of Moshe Rabbeinu. His job was to feed faith to Jews. It should become internalized. That the tzaddik with his faith will live not like the way the Polish, Hungarian Hasidus and Hasidim and Rebbes believe. You rely on the tzaddik. In the Chabad ethos and system, it's about the tzaddik making the emunah, faith by you, permeate your inner being. Just coming to a tzaddik and having a piece of kugel, going into Yechidus and writing to him and holding his tzaddik is not good enough. It's not good enough, according to Chabad. Chabad demands that the tzaddik become in your kishkis in a way that you relate to it. That's a different ballgame. For that, you need a Moshe Rabbeinu to teach you and help you make that emunah pnimius. So, listen, it's a mistake to think a Rebbe, tzaddik, is there for you to believe in him. No, he's there to make your belief in God pnimius. Did you hear that? And this is an answer to the Litvak Taina, the Litvak argument of old. What kind of business is believing in a Rebbe and a human being? And the answer is no, you have it wrong. It's not believing in a Rebbe, it's believing that this individual has the ability to help me believe better in God, understand, have a deeper belief in God. And that's acceptable. What's the difference between a Rosh Hashiva giving you a shiur in Gemara and making that, a reality, or a Rebbe doing it through a niggin? Through a story, through a movement of a hand. The whole idea is to make your emunah in Hashem more. Let's continue. Moshe drew the level of das into Jewish souls. I will give your grass and your field to your animals. Moshe, it doesn't literally mean grass for animals. It means for the souls that are considered animal souls. Moshe gave them food, das, hu hergish. Moshe made behemoths like us feel some real godliness. We don't feel godliness. We feel gashmius. Moshe Rabbeinu took such behemoths that we are, and he said, let me help you feel some ruchnius. Moshe huraya mehemna. That's why Moshe is called the faithful shepherd. Moshe sustains and feeds Jewish souls in the matter of faith. That the emunah should be in a deep way and felt deep inside. Moshe Rabbeinu does that. And that's why we need a Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, tomorrow we'll learn the Kitzur, maybe talk a little more about this. Meanwhile, Zayagazun to everyone. Have a great day. Only Hatzlach and everything. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Take care.